I want to thank my entire family with a special emphasis on a woman named Barbara.
She was a wife.
President Bush would be the first to tell you that he could not have done any of this without her.
A mother.
She was the sergeant.
A grandmother.
We call her the enforcer.
And an icon for change.
I haven't been elected to public office. I'm not courageous enough to do that. But I can make a difference, truthfully.
Tonight, we remember the life and legacy of Barbara Bush, Houston's First Lady.
And we begin tonight with a live look this evening from downtown Houston, where the city is just wrapping up a tribute to former First Lady Barbara Bush. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for this special look at the life and legacy of Barbara Pierce Bush. I'm Bill Biasa.
And I'm Lauren Freeman. Through the next hour, we will be taking a look at the former First Lady's life and the contributions she made to our country and to this city.
First, though, we want to update you on events happening now. Beginning at noon tomorrow through midnight, the public may visit Mrs. Bush at St. Martin's Episcopal Church. You need to catch the shuttle at Second Baptist Church, located on Woodway and Voss.
Her funeral will be held Saturday, starting at 11 a.m. at St. Martin's. That will be followed by a private burial at the family plot at the Bush Library in College Station. The city of Houston hosted a celebration of life for the former First Lady this evening.
A number of Houstonians were there, our Keith Garvin included. Keith, what was the mood like there this evening?
Well, Bill, Lauren, it was dubbed a celebration of life, and that's exactly what it was. This was a celebration. This was not a somber event at all. There were so many warm, wonderful remembrances of our former First Lady here today. We had members of the faith community share their thoughts. Most of them, almost all of them, had very personal interactions with Mrs. Bush and the First Family. Also, some performances as well from different groups. One of those groups very near and dear to the hearts of Mrs. Bush and her family was the Houston Children's Chorus. They've been around for 29 years, and they have performed in front of or for the Bushes for 32 different times. And so they were very happy to get the call to be here today as well. One of the highlights of the day was when a letter from President George H.W. Bush was read. He just thanked the crowd. He wrote it specifically for the crowd that was here today, thanking them for being here. And he also had some humor in there as well. He talked about how he and his wife were big fans of the Astros and how they rooted for them and how that was such a big moment when the Astros won the World Series. And he also talked about how now that the Rockets are on their push for a world championship, in his note, he said that he was hoping that Barbara was going to give them a push from up in heaven. And so, again, a celebration of life is truly what it was, not a somber event at all. A lot of folks lifted up by the life and the legacy of the former First Lady. Bill, Lauren.
All right, Keith, thank you, sir. As we mentioned just a few moments ago, Mrs. Bush will lie in repose at St. Martin's Episcopal Church beginning at noon tomorrow.
Our Phil Archer is live now from down the street from St. Martin's at Second Baptist with what you need to know if you plan to visit the church. Phil?
Well, Lauren, we can show you they've started moving equipment in here now to the Second Baptist campus. People, as you have explained, who are attending the viewing tomorrow will have to come here and park their cars. They'll go through a security screening, and then they'll have to board shuttle buses that will take them from here to St. Martin's, about 3 miles away. The chapel there will open at noon. It will remain open until midnight to allow mourners to pay their respects to Mrs. Bush. They estimate they'll be able to move about 2,000 people an hour through security to the chapel and back between noon and midnight tomorrow. Metro's providing 20 buses. They expect to have a bus leaving the Second Baptist lot every 2 to 3 minutes. And a section of Woodway Drive between Sage Road and Chimney Rock has been closed for security. There'll be police stationed all along that route. Planners say to expect long lines and traffic snarls.
Will patience be the number one theme of the day? Yes. It's going to take you a little bit to get screened. It's going to take you a little bit to get on the bus. And it's going to take you a little bit to, when you get to St. Martin's, to actually work your way to pay your respects.
Now, it's important to remember access to the chapel will be by shuttle bus only. No walk-ups are going to be allowed. And police are cautioning that no one will be allowed photography on the bus or in the chapel. They'll not be allowed to board with bags or weapons. So if you're planning to come and attend the viewing tomorrow, allow yourself plenty of time to get that done. Reporting live in Southwest Houston, I'm Phil Archer, KPRC Channel 2 News.
Thank you, Phil. Barbara Bush, as you know, is one of the most recognizable individuals in U.S. history. That beautiful shock of white hair, her trademark pearls, and that sharp wit developing a legacy, whether the former First Lady was aware of it or not.
Tonight, our Rachel McNeil takes us on a journey through Barbara Bush's life from Rye, New York to right here in Houston, with hundreds of stops in between.
Barbara Pierce was born in Flushing, Queens, New York City in June of 1925. She was the third of 4 children born to Marvin and Pauline Pierce. Barbara grew up in Rye, New York. She attended Milton Public School, Rye Country Day School, and eventually boarding school at Ashley Hall in Charleston, South Carolina. In 1941, at only 16 years old, Barbara met the man she would spend the rest of her life with at a dance while on Christmas vacation, a young Navy pilot named George Herbert Walker Bush.
George Bush sees her and asks a friend to introduce him. And so they start to dance and a waltz comes on. And George Bush says, I don't know how to waltz. Can we sit down and talk?
Barbara was immediately smitten.
I could hardly breathe. I thought he was so beautiful.
Within a year and a half, the two were engaged to be married just before George went off to fight in World War II. The young couple kept in touch by writing letters.
December 12th, 1943. My darling Bar, this should be a very easy letter to write. I love you, precious, with all my heart, and to know that you love me means my life.
In 1944, the love affair nearly ended in tragedy. George's plane was shot down over the island of Chichijima. He was rescued and made his way home to marry the love of his life.
And you'll notice that the date is penciled in. They were originally going to get married on December the 17th, but he couldn't get back to get married. So they had the date of the wedding actually printed onto the wedding invitations.
On January 6, 1945, the two began another chapter of their lives by exchanging vows at the First Presbyterian Church in Rye, New York. The young couple moved to Texas when George entered the oil business after graduating from Yale. They eventually settled in Midland. George and Barbara started their family in 1946. Over the following 13 years, the couple had 6 children. George Walker was first, followed by Robin and then Jeb. But in 1953, a tragedy for the family.
She told us that Robin had leukemia. Well, what do you do for leukemia? Well, she said, you don't do anything. She's going to die. And we said, no, I don't think so. And she said, my advice is take her home, love her. In about 2 weeks, she'll be gone.
They didn't give up that easily. The couple traveled the country looking for a miracle.
They took bone marrow tests, which were painful, a lot of blood, and they put her on chemo. And poor Gampy, every time she got a blood transfusion, he'd have to leave the room.
But little Robin died 9 months later, just shy of her 4th birthday.
I was combing her hair and holding her hand. I saw that little body. I saw her spirit go.
A tragedy that would impact the couple deeply. They went on to have 3 more children, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. The family relocated to West Texas, and while George built his oil business, Barbara tended to the family.
She was on the front lines. She's the one who's making dinner and helping with the homework and putting them to bed, and she was a den mother, and she drove, carpool.
He traveled a lot. He was very busy, so, didn't see him as often as we saw Mom. Mom was like a constant force in our life. She was always there, making the meals and, arbitrating the fights and making us clean our rooms and hang our towels and make our beds and that kind of thing.
In 1959, George entered politics. Barbara helped George win his first race as the Harris County Republican chairman. Years later, he ran for the U.S. Senate and lost. But when he did win a congressional seat 2 years later, Barbara was right by his side. As the wife of a congressman, Barbara worked with various charities and women's groups in Washington. She formed relationships with diplomats from all over the world when George was appointed U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
The president has just formally introduced Republican Congressman George Bush of Texas as the successor to Charles Yost as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
The couple then moved across the world when George was appointed head of the U.S. Liaison Office in the People's Republic of China.
My dad was the first representative from the United States to China back in 1975 and 1976, before U.S.-China relations were formalized. It was a very sleepy kind of a post at the time. He had just come off of being the head of the Republican Party during a very contentious time when the Nixon-Watergate scandal was in full bloom. So they really enjoyed, being in a new country, the end of the Cultural Revolution.
In 1980, Barbara defended her husband's experience when George announced his candidacy for president. She caused a stir when she said she supported ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment and was pro-choice on abortion. California Governor Ronald Reagan was nominated, but he picked George as his running mate. It was then Barbara would choose what would soon become her legacy.
So she tells the story of running in the park one day, trying to think about all the things that concerned her. Poverty, drug addiction, unwed mothers, this whole list of things that she thought that she could do all of these. And what she figured out is she felt there was sort of a common cause for a lot of our social ills, and that was lack of education. So that's when she decided to pick literacy.
Coming up, the Bushes head to the White House.
Mrs. Bush was known for just being down to earth, and she sort of became known as everybody's mom or everyone's grandmother. And she just threw herself into the job.
How she changed the office of the First Lady and made a lasting impact on the country.
Also ahead, the former First Lady takes her message from the White House to the world.
Hey, Mrs. Bush. I brought our playbook on how to beat low literacy.
Oh, great. Come on in.
How her work has impacted lives everywhere as we continue to remember Barbara Bush, Houston's First Lady.
I want to put my focus on things I can do something about, like education, hunger,
Literacy.
AIDS. Well, literacy covers education, but there's so many things that I care about.
And Barbara Bush did just that, creating her own platform as the wife of the Vice President and eventually First Lady.
It's a journey, of course, that she took along with her husband, George, a journey that many say he couldn't have made without her. Here once again is Rachel McNeil.
Barbara Bush spent 8 years as Second Lady. Her trademark white hair and pearls made her a household name. During this time, she began working with several different literacy organizations. In 1984, she wrote a children's book about her family, told from the point of view of her dog, C. Fred, called C. Fred's Story. All the proceeds from the book went to literacy charities. The American public also got a taste of Barbara's humor and sharp wit. During the 1984 presidential campaign, she made headlines when she told the press that she could not say on television what she thought of vice presidential candidate Geraldine Ferraro, but, quote, it rhymes with rich. She later apologized.
My grandmother is also, I said my grandfather's super strong. My grandmother is very strong-willed. I mean, probably, truthfully, one of the strongest personalities that I've been privileged to know for my entire life.
In 1988, Vice President Bush announced his candidacy for president to succeed President Reagan. During the campaign, USA Today asked Mrs. Bush and Kitty Dukakis, the wife of Democratic nominee Michael Dukakis, to each write a weekly column.
This is again from White House days.
Jean Becker was charged with editing those columns for the paper.
Mrs. Bush, I would deal with her directly. She would be the one, I would take it, edit it, fit the space. I would always have to cut it, and then they would get final, because it was their column. So I'd have to call back, and I would call Kitty's press secretary, but I would call Barbara Bush, because she was writing those columns absolutely herself.
George Bush won the nomination and eventually the election, and Barbara became the First Lady of the United States. She hired Jean Becker as her deputy press secretary.
I think for Mrs. Bush, after Nancy Reagan. Nancy Reagan was known for her fashion and, she's an excellent entertainer and brought a lot of very sophisticated style to the White House. Mrs. Bush was known for just being down to earth, and she sort of became known as everybody's mom or everyone's grandmother. And she just threw herself into the job.
She continued her work for literacy in the White House.
Every single thing would be better in this world if more people could read, write, and comprehend.
and made it her mission to make a difference.
I did ask our staff to plan something every single day that helps somebody, because you do have the bully pulpit, and it's a mistake if you don't use it, truthfully.
One of those events, a visit to a center in D.C. that worked with men, women, and babies who were HIV positive.
And she made a big deal of holding that baby, of holding a baby. She wanted people to know that that was okay. You were not gonna get AIDS if you held a baby, if you hugged someone with AIDS.
A photo of that moment appeared in papers worldwide. She was also known to be a spontaneous First Lady, at one point insisting she and her staff go to a Washington, D.C. mall after reading a newspaper article about stores kicking the Salvation Army bell ringers off of their property.
Oh my gosh, she just couldn't believe it. She was furious. And that day, we gathered the White House press corps, went to a mall in Washington, D.C., and she made a donation to a Red Kettle bell ringer and then gave a little talk about this is who we are, this is America. Salvation Army has never forgotten that.
But her passion for literacy was the top priority.
Well, all experts tell us that the way a child learns to read starts at home. The parents are the first teachers, and it's just a wonderful way for children to begin to learn.
In 1989, she founded the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. In 1991, President Bush signed the National Literacy Act into law.
It is my pleasure to sign into law H.R. 751, the National Literacy Act.
The act gave millions of adults a second chance to earn their high school diplomas, and many, many more the chance to learn to read, write, and speak English. President Bush lost the re-election in 1992, and in January of 1993, the Bushes returned to private life, settling into their Tanglewood home.
And then they came back here, and once again, they just rolled up their sleeves and jumped headfirst into both Houston, the community. As much as I know President Bush would have liked to have won the election, of course, they also sort of embraced private life.
You know, a lot of people were skeptical that they'd move back here, that it would be too slow or boring or whatever. This is home for them, and they love Houston, and they're great promoters of Houston.
From sporting events and restaurants to the rodeo and everyday errands around town, the president and former First Lady were often spotted out and about. The Bushes regularly attended services at St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston.
It wasn't unusual to see President Bush shopping at the local grocery store or maybe going to Costco or something. He loved to be in the community, but he was also there to support the Astros. He went to the Texans football games. He would be involved in every aspect of life in Houston, and Houston is his home.
From Astros games to Texans games, the couple supported their home teams. They spent summers up north in Kennebunkport, Maine.
I enjoy seeing them every year at the Memorial Day Parade in Dock Square. They're always there.
They're not just summer people, they're ingrained in the community.
And ingrained in a country. Presidential historian, Pulitzer Prize-winning author John Meacham was granted unprecedented access to the Bushes to write Destiny and Power, the American Odyssey of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Very few presidential families would do this. They opened up everything without condition. No right of review. Mrs. Bush gave me her diary from 1948 forward. That was the one thing. She got to make sure the quotations from it were okay, but she didn't take anything off the record that I asked to use.
Up next, Barbara Bush's legacy lives on.
The impact that she's had on the communities that her programs have been able to touch and affect is just enormous.
From schools to libraries, how her message of literacy is making a lasting impact on the community.
I'm getting a little bit of a, what you'd call an inferiority complex or an identity crisis. Because everywhere I go, it's nice seeing you, sir, but where's Barbara? Where's Barbara? Oh, we love your wife.
Barbara Bush used her popularity and her position to make a difference. She chose literacy as her platform while in D.C.
And it turned out to be a topic that followed her home and became more than just a project. As Rachel McNeil found out, it became a passion and eventually her life's work.
In 2013, Barbara Bush's vision of literacy expanded to focus on Houston.
Her main focus over the years has been family literacy. Her concern is that, that literacy starts in the home and that parents need to be more aware of how important literacy is for their kids. So she's supported adult literacy centers, helping them implement child programs or family programs in those centers. We've actually broadened the mission here in Houston. Houston has a literacy crisis that affects all age groups.
The Bush family created the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, a foundation separate from the National Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy.
Their sense of philanthropy is almost connected in some way to this deep sense of everybody gives a shot, and I think in a weird way that's tied to the Houston attitude that I love so much about this city.
The Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation's mission is to improve lives through the power of literacy. We are carrying forth Mrs. Bush's legacy interest in literacy. She believes that if you help a person to read, then their opportunities in life will be endless.
Mrs. Bush served as honorary chairman of the foundation and continued to spread the foundation's message by making public appearances and reading at Houston area schools.
You see the box and the fox?
And even appearing on the popular children's program, Sesame Street.
I bet, very much.
She's very patient. She listens to the kids. I remember when she came out and read as part of our Read Across the Globe initiative. She was with a group of kindergartners and it was around Halloween time, and so they started chiming in about what they were going to be for Halloween, and Mrs. Bush didn't shush them too much. She listened and responded to them and was very funny in interacting with them. But you could tell that she had this rapport that they didn't know her and they were kindergartners, but she also automatically gravitated to them. They gravitated to her.
The foundation even paired the former First Lady with some very recognizable Houston sports figures.
Hi, I'm Dwight Howard of the Houston Rockets, and this is the First Lady, Barbara Bush.
Hey, Mrs. Bush. I brought our playbook on how to beat low literacy.
Oh, great. Come on in.
Several schools across the country, a library in Harris County, and a children's hospital in Portland, Maine, all carry her name.
The impact that she's had on the communities that her programs have been able to touch and affect is just enormous.
I think Mrs. Bush will always be known as the First Lady of Literacy. People will remember her because how much she deeply cares about this important cause and that she's championed it long after her term in the White House.
My grandmother has an incredible legacy of impacting other people's lives. I mean, it's sort of amazing to think how many people's lives have been touched by my grandmother, who she's never met in person, who she'll never hear from.
Barbara Bush has been a very important inspiration for me. I learned to read at the age of 49. I don't know what my life would have been like if I have not took the time out to seek out someone who would help me.
Coming up, their love story is one for the ages.
She also worships the ground George Bush walks on, and he is, without a doubt, the love of her life.
A look at the family life George and Barbara Bush built together.
We had a daughter. She said, "I love you more than tongue can tell." And that's the way I feel about Barbara.
As we continue to remember Barbara Bush, Houston's First Lady.
For many years, she was the dutiful housewife. She was the one that was there at Little League, or to read the reports when they came in, or to have a word with the kid who used a dirty word. One day that two of our sons, I won't tell you which one, and we walked up along the driveway, and one of them used the second dirtiest word I ever heard, and the other one said, "Well, if I'm a blank, you're the worst dirtiest word I ever heard." So when they got to the door, it was Barbara who had to bawl them out and then report them to me, and then I finally get into the act. But she was wonderful when they fall in the bayou swinging across on a rope and come up all dirty and wet, and whether it was the oldest or the youngest. And for many years she did that. She did other things along the way. That was what her life was, being a wonderful mother and a wonderful wife.
President Bush there, talking about his wife and how she managed to do it all. You know, Mrs. Bush was very popular, not only here at home, but all across the world.
And no place was that more evident than in College Station, the home of the George H.W. Bush Library at A&M, where Barbara Bush will be buried.
Our Mario Diaz is in College Station right now with a look for us. Mario?
And Bill, where I stand right now is inside the Rose Garden of Barbara Bush. And just take a look at this scene around me here. The sun is setting off on the horizon, and you can see all of these roses here right now in full spirit, in full bloom. It is truly exquisite, and which is why many people tend to walk around the path here. But what is so interesting about this place is that it was not uncommon for Mrs. Bush herself to walk around the pond here on the grounds of the Presidential Library. In fact, she last did so in early March. And one young student who I spoke to from the Bush School, which is the building right over there, said that she felt compelled to go up to Secret Service and say, "May I please have a word with the First Lady? I'm a member of the Bush School here." So she did just that, and she was able to share a moment with the former First Lady.
And we just started conversation, and I was amazed how much she knew about my country, and I was amazed how easygoing, how direct, and I had a feeling that I'm just talking to a very close friend or to somebody that I know for a long time instead of such an amazing and important figure in this country's history.
Yeah, she had that ability of just making you feel very comfortable because she was so real with everyone that she met. One other aspect of her that made her so intriguing for so many people and also showed her loving side as a mother was that every single time that she came to these grounds, she made a trek past the gates over there to the back to visit her young daughter Robin, who passed away at the age of 3. On Saturday, she will be buried right beside her daughter. Reporting live here in College Station, Mario Diaz, KPRC, Channel 2 News.
Beautifully put, Mario. Yes. Thank you, sir.
And there is no doubt the president and Barbara had a love unlike any other. The couple were married for 73 years.
So remarkable, huh? They had children and grandchildren who continue to carry on the couple's mission of service.
Barbara and George Bush were married for more than 7 decades.
They are a wonderful pair. They're a wonderful couple and truly are so complimentary of each other.
It was a great partnership. I still think a movie needs to be made about them.
It was indeed a love story fit for the big screen, evident through love letters they sent to each other through the years that they shared with their granddaughter Jenna Bush Hager for the Today Show.
Good night, my beautiful. Every time I say beautiful, you about kill me, but you'll have to accept it.
So why would she kill you when you called her beautiful?
Well, she's modest lass.
But you were very beautiful. We have your engagement picture.
Yeah.
The first picture.
Not bad now.
Not bad now.
Feel like wrinkles. Lucky now.
Rumpelstiltskin.
Letters that were a beautiful part of their personal history.
January 6, 1994. For Barbara Pierce from GHWB. Will you marry me? Whoops. I forgot you did that 49 years ago today. I was very happy on that day in 1945, but I'm even happier today. You've given me joy that few men know. I've climbed perhaps the highest mountain in the world, but even that cannot hold a candle to being Barbara's husband. Mom used to tell me, "Now, George, don't walk ahead."
You never listen to your mother.
My grandparents have an incredible relationship. I think maybe 2 summers ago, my cousins and I were all very shocked when we learned that they were each other's first kiss, which was adorable. And we loved finding out sort of that both my grandmother and my grandfather remember vividly the first time they met each other.
I can't remember a lot of stuff. I do remember that. The dance at Greenwich, the Greenwich Country Club. And here was this beautiful girl. And I asked a friend, Frank Wozencraft, "Who is that beautiful girl?" He said, "That is Barbara Pierce from Rye." And so I asked her to dance. The rest is history.
And their love was evident even decades after their wedding.
Mrs. Bush was, she and I were working on something together, and we could hear President Bush's voice. He was coming up the stairs to my office, and she found a mirror and did this, pinched her cheeks. She also worships the ground George Bush walks on, and he is, without a doubt, the love of her life. Both of them, separate from each other, had been complaining to me that they weren't sleeping at night because the other one snored. And I finally said to President Bush one day, because I knew a lot of couples my age, who were having similar issues and had decided to go to separate bedrooms and just so they could sleep at night. So I said to President Bush one day, I said, has it occurred to you, sir, that maybe you all should sleep in separate bedrooms so you both just can get some sleep? And he looked at me and he was appalled by this idea. And he says, I have to be able to reach out in the middle of the night and know she's there.
We had a daughter. She said, I love you more than tongue can tell. And that's the way I feel about Barbara.
A love that could only be matched by the love for their children. The couple raised their children with high expectations.
President Bush grew up in a family where service was an expectation. In fact, it was kind of an obligation. He also brought that same expectation to his children. Every single one of his children has given back to this community called America and the world phenomenally.
George Walker, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. But even the strong Barbara Bush had her moments of doubt about her life and accomplishments.
My mom, interestingly, after raising all 5 kids, the surviving kids, questioned her life. Like, what have I done in life? And I mean, to think that she would have any doubts. There were women her at that time that were taking on more and more professional jobs, and she was like, I've done nothing in my life. Sorry. That's amazing to me to think about. Anyway, it's the most important job in the world.
All Bush children, all leaders in their professions and their communities. Most recognizably, George Walker Bush. Barbara campaigned for her son after he announced his run in June of 1999. He was elected 43rd president and took the oath of office in January of 2001. Jeb served as governor of Florida. Before he officially announced his candidacy for president, Barbara was asked what she thought about a potential run by another Bush.
Mrs. Bush, would you like to see your son Jeb run?
He's by far the best qualified man, but no, I really don't. I think it's a great country. There are a lot of great families, and it's not just 4 families or whatever. There are other people out there that are very qualified, and we've had enough Bushes.
Jeb joined the crowded race, and Barbara changed her tune, even campaigning for Jeb, who eventually withdrew from the race before the primary. Having children in the public eye and subject to scrutiny wasn't easy for the former First Lady.
She gets really upset about personal statements against her kids. So she hasn't had much to worry about with me, but occasionally she'll read things that people say about George W. or Jeb, and boy, does that get her fired up.
Neil and Marvin, both successful businessmen and community leaders, and Dorothy works in the nonprofit sector. That success continues today with his grandchildren.
She has instilled in every single one of her grandkids, including myself, this sense that, just because we're part of this family, we can't take it for granted, and we have to almost turn that into something that benefits others. It can't just be we live lives for ourselves.
And on her 90th birthday, she spoke with her granddaughter and Today Show correspondent Jenna Bush Hager.
Why do you think we call you the enforcer?
Well, because I enforce. If you do something bad, I point it out to you.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I can account to that.
Yeah, but I stood up for you when you stuck your tongue out at all the press.
Because you've been wanting to do that for years.
Every American has.
They also built long-lasting friendships through the years on both sides of the aisle.
And so enemies of his back in the past have become good friends, like Nancy Pelosi and people that, used to fight him in the trenches are buddies with him now.
People began to joke that I was getting so close to the Bush family I had become the black sheep's son. My mother told me not to talk too long today. And Barbara, I will not let you down.
Proving that politics can take a back seat to friendship.
Still ahead tonight.
Are you excited about this election season also?
No.
A look at the former First Lady's trademark wit as we continue to remember Barbara Bush, Houston's First Lady.
We talk about everything, and Nicaragua talk us not to believe in polls.
He does not seek my opinion.
He does not seek your opinion.
Sometimes he gets it, but not sought.
Sometimes you give it to him.
Unsought.
Barbara Bush was well known for her candor. Her quick wit often demonstrated her humor as well.
But it also put her in the headlines more than once. Here again is Rachel McNeil.
Just as recognizable as her pearl necklace was Barbara Bush's quick wit.
I hate to be trite, but you sort of got what you saw is what you got. And again, you always knew where you stood with her.
My mom remembers everything, and she's funny and off the cuff and refreshing. My mother is amazing.
Neil is not my favorite. He's one of my favorites.
She says the things that you're thinking, but you probably wouldn't say.
I love the fact that she speaks her mind and speaks her values and her opinions. I think that many times, people want to know and look to her as a leader and as an advocate and believer in the things that she believes in.
During the 1992 presidential campaign, Barbara stated that abortion and homosexuality are personal matters and argued the Republican Party platform shouldn't take a stand on them.
When she was First Lady, there were a couple times she got into a little bit of trouble. One that comes to mind is gun control. And she got out a little bit ahead of her husband, just a little bit. But she was smart enough. She sort of knew the line she could go up to, but not cross it, and leave reporters guessing.
And after leaving the White House, she continued to openly share her opinions. In 2010, CNN's Larry King asked Barbara about former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin.
What's your read about Sarah Palin?
Well, I sat next to her once, thought she was beautiful, and I think she's very happy in Alaska, and I hope she'll stay there.
President Bush also is one of the smartest people I have ever met. And he loved to promote her sassiness and her wit and her sharp wit, as did her son, George W.
Jean Becker was telling me a little bit more insight about Mrs. Bush, and she said, you'll be getting along with her very well, and if you think you might have done something wrong, you'll know for sure if she calls you dearie. So we were at lunch one day, and I was sitting by Mrs. Bush, and we were discussing something, and I said something that didn't agree with her, and she said, well, dearie. And she went on to talk, and I looked over at Jean Becker, and Jean went, you got the dearie. So I have experienced the dearie.
The former First Lady had a series of health scares over the years. The most recent, a stay at Houston Methodist in January of 2017 while she was treated for bronchitis. In March of 2009, she had surgery to replace an aortic valve.
And it went so well, and I've been a nervous wreck about it.
A procedure doctors called routine.
But it didn't seem routine to me when you go in there and put a pig's valve in your wife. And we've had a lot of jokes in our family about whether she's going to go oink, oink, going around.
Just months before, in November of 2008, she was also in Houston Methodist for a perforated ulcer. But health issues never dampened her spirits, proving even later in life that she knew how to have fun, surprising granddaughter Jenna Bush on the Today Show on Halloween 2016.
I heard she was going to dress up like a witch, so I did too.
President Bush would be the first to tell you that he could not have done any of this without her.
Little did I know I was only trying to keep up with Barbara Pierce from Onondaga Street in Rye, New York. I love you.
I love you too.
What do you feel like have been the biggest blessings?
You know who I think is my biggest blessing. Think of the life he's given me.
And as we all know by now, it was a life well lived. Now, as we head to break, we want to give you a look inside St. Martin's Episcopal Church, where Barbara Bush will lie in repose beginning at noon tomorrow.
At the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a husband, a child, a friend, or a parent.
And friends and family meant so much to Mrs. Bush.
Our Robert Arnold spoke with a man who worked for the Bushes, but says he felt much more like a member of the family than an employee.
I think there's two words that sum up Barbara Bush, and those words are, she cares.
The year was 1969, and Peter Roussel signed on to work for a young congressman by the name of George Herbert Walker Bush. He also met Barbara Bush, who was writing a newsletter for her husband's congressional district.
Are they big shots? Yes. Do they act like big shots? Absolutely not.
Roussel says that's something he quickly learned the first time he met the not yet First Lady. Being a respectful gentleman, Roussel referred to her as Mrs. Bush.
Finally, all of a sudden, she went, "Dearie, stop." She said, "Call me Bar."
Roussel says that genuine, friendly demeanor instantly endeared him to Mrs. Bush. As the years passed and Roussel became President Ronald Reagan's press secretary and the Bushes ascended to the White House, he remained close to the family.
I consider her, in many ways, my second mother.
That bond was sealed in what Roussel says is his favorite photograph of the first couple, a picture signed, "Such love from your number 2 Ma, Bar."
I can't tell you how much, to this day, how touched I am by that.
With political life behind them, Roussel and the Bushes settled in Houston.
Much of their life had been here prior to the presidency. They had many friends here. They love this city.
A love evident in the multiple contributions made to hospitals and various charities, but most notably to the Houston Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation.
Houston has a literacy crisis that affects all age groups. And so Mom's vision is you can't realize your full potential in life if you can't read at an age-appropriate level.
Roussel says in addition to the charity work, Mrs. Bush enjoyed being part of a stitching group at St. Martin's Church near the Galleria. He also says a lot of people don't realize, but she could keep baseball box scores like the pros, a skill he says she picked up when her soon-to-be husband was captain of the Yale baseball team.
And a lot of people don't know how to actually keep a box score. She knows how, and she knows how because she went to the baseball games at Yale.
But Roussel says Mrs. Bush's busy schedule never detracted from family or friends.
They reach out. They don't wait for you to seek them out and come to them. They reach out to you. Christmas here when I was alone, pick up the phone. There she is, there he is. Come over and spend Christmas with us.
Roussel says it is that selfless spirit of giving he remembers most about the former First Lady, a woman he met nearly half a century ago who said, "Just call me Bar."
I would want people to know about the kindness in her heart.
Now, before we leave you tonight, we want to go over the events happening over the next few days.
Starting at noon tomorrow through midnight, the public may visit Mrs. Bush at St. Martin's Episcopal Church.
Her funeral is going to be held Saturday starting at 11 a.m. at St. Martin's. She will then be buried at the Presidential Library in College Station.
We will bring you her funeral service live here on Channel 2 Saturday morning.
Later that afternoon, we will also bring you the burial service live. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We leave you tonight with a video from the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation.
Good night.
Once upon a time, in a place not far away, a maiden mused about a love she hoped one day to see. When through a crowd he did appear, a knight so tall and sway, their magical life together was simply meant to be. Soaring in bravery her knight flew high, whilst evil foe he did slay. But in his letters home he sighed, "I'll come back soon to stay." Love prospered with children and beasts galore, while across vast lands they traveled. From hither and yon and shore to shore, their union would not be unraveled. From the house painted white, where he named points of light, while his lady sowed seeds for success, the landscape they wrought with missions so bright meant we, their subjects, were blessed. 3 generations of family ensued, all being of service to others. A magical tale celebrates the reed passed on to sisters and brothers. 70 years since their story began, here's this family, beloved indeed. Men, women, and children, family and friends, all do wish them Godspeed. May they live happily ever after, and the story never ends.